I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of, baby. Scheme a while, dream a while, you're sure to find happiness. And I guess all the things you always pine for. Gee, I'd like to see you looking swell, baby. Diamond bracelets, Woolworths doesn't sell, baby. Till that lucky day, you'll know darn well, baby, I can't give you anything but love. I'd love to see you looking swell, baby. But diamond bracelets, Woolworths doesn't sell, baby. Till that lucky day, you'll know darn well, baby, I can't give you anything but love. I can't give you anything but love.
Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like
to that lower red. No.
It's a matter of him trying to refresh the screen.
Got it.
He wasn't sure about what your refresh rate on your computer is. Is it 16 megahertz or?
Unsure of that.
Okay. I think it's going to be
Okay. Reopening the meeting for Tuesday, May 26th, going on with item 5, 3943 State Street. Greetings.
Hi. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Patrick Conway. I'm with Regency Centers. We're the owner of the Five Points Shopping Center on Upper State Street. And we wanted to present today, or presented about a year ago for a small renovation of the site. We finished that up, and we wanted to really do a little bit more. So we put a public art component together, which we presented to the Arts Advisory Commission about 3 weeks ago, and was very well received, which prompted this presentation and submittal to the Architectural Review Board. With that, you have our submittal. Although with the resolution a little bit sketchy here, we can at least kind of walk through it a little bit and talk about what we're trying to accomplish here.
I wonder if, is everything on your screen also presented in this handout?
I have an exact copy of the presentation here, which differs a little bit from the submittal. I'm happy to pass this out so you have that.
Well, I'm just wondering if you're having problems with that maybe you should present it here and the camera can just focus on sheet by sheet as we go through that.
We can do that. Let me see if I can have a larger version of it.
If you turn it
You
to
wanna do
face
it
us,
upside down
if
for
it's
you?
not a problem for you, to look at it upside down.
That'll work.
Yeah.
Thank you. So really what we want to do here is really kind of enhance the shopping experience at the center, and with how strong the arts community is, we wanted to kind of bring that into the Five Points Shopping Center. And with that, and on this site plan, we've really targeted a number of areas, and as we flip through this, there's a number of slides, so we'll try to get through it quickly. Some key areas that we wanted to focus on that are either gathering spots for customers or have large walls that are, somewhat bland as we go through. I double-sided this print, so this gives you the color palette, that you'll see throughout the entire shopping center. And each page will have its own detail of what color is on each art piece and component.
So basically you're talking about painting and tile?
Painting, tile, and then when we get to a couple of slides, there are a few pieces that are offset from the wall by a few inches, and that'll either be a plywood, marine plywood material. The artists are kind of just figuring out what the best application for that is, and I'll point that out as we flip through. And this is the wall of Big Five, and what you see here is exactly what we're picking out. Actually, if you go to the next page, show you a little bit better zoomed in area. So it's a pretty bland wall along there, and that goes back to our trash enclosure area. So, it just kind of gives you, kind of abstract pattern. And the whole theme of what we wanted to try to do is bring the plaza, modern take to kind of the Spanish design, and bring that kind of whimsical feel to the shopping center. So what you'll see on 1B there is, that's going to be, more of an enhancement as opposed to just paint. So the pelican will be brought off the wall a little bit, give it some dimension, and give it a little bit more character as to just paint. And this is a big archway, as you'll see in the picture. It's a pretty bland area right now. So, once again, kind of a whimsical use of color, bring a little bit of scale to what is really somewhat of a bland, retail facade, frankly, at this point, and has some contrasting forms, to bring some interest to the buildings. This is as you turn the corner. Big Five is one of our anchors. We have a lot of planters that are out in front of the shopping center, most of them that were reworked or redone as part of the renovation. But once again, this is kind of a plaza area. Some of the first things that you encounter as you go from the parking lot into the main, really, courtyard or sidewalks before you enter the store, just to create a little visual interest there. And this is what you see there on the Big Five is paint.
This as well as paint?
Yes. So that can be touched up and reworked as needed. And that's a common theme. We have probably 20 low planter walls kind of throughout the shopping center, and you'll see as we get to the main plaza courtyard, that we change the patterns up as you kind of move throughout the center, just to create a little variety and interest kind of throughout. Thank you for flipping through those.
Sure, no problem.
Another example of just these raised planters, which we kept during the renovation, but this just brings a little more color and interest to them.
Is the orange image of tile, or is that painted?
That is that paint. We're looking at whether the use of some tiles in areas with just the shopping carts and things. Anything that's low, the tile tends to get banged and chipped. So we try to stay away from it in the immediate, shopping area where we can. This is you kind of turn the corner from CVS. It's kind of whimsical. You have Seagull here, and once again, this is your 1B detail where that's going to be offset from the wall a little bit. We have a pretty generic bike rack that's as part of this. We'll probably want to come in and change some of those out to create a little more interest, particularly with this particular installation here.
So you have a number of artists involved as opposed to just one?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll bring a variety. The artists are being interviewed now, and we're budgeting and pricing, the various installations. So there will be multiple artists, including some local youth artists we'll get to when we kind of get to that area. Once again, just a scale at these entranceways. You'll see that throughout, and some of these same color patterns match some of the lower seat walls that we saw out in front of CVS. So similar patterns that are kind of brought throughout the project. Once again, you have some large walls, and what the artist did here was provide some kind of a visual break to what is really considered an overlooked public space. Draw some interest, kind of as opposed to just a blank wall as you come into into the retail area. So this is Zone 2, and if everyone's not real familiar with the shopping center, we'll start to sneak into the shops here. This is Area 8 right here, which is just in the corner of Albertsons. This is you're starting to roll towards Starbucks and some of the other shops, and as you get closer to Ross, immediately. We did add some number of trellises on the next page as part of the redevelopment of the center, wanting to create a little more space and interest. And this is just paint applied, it's kind of some unexpected applications just to kind of energize these particular areas and patios. Just interesting use of color and patterns to bring some interest to this patio area. This is kind of out in front of Starbucks here. It's kind of a high traffic area, but kind of a wide sidewalk too. We have our painted bases down at the edge of the columns too. This is one of the towers that you see at the corner of Ross. It's a pretty, it's a big architectural feature. So this does, the subtle patterns, and you'll see this pattern that was also included in our monument signs out on the street. It's a similar pieces and you'll see that kind of throughout the shopping center. And this just has the one raised piece here, and then a kind of a dulled tones for the other pattern on those towers. This is really the main plaza area. This is out in front of Blenders and Subway, and in front of Ross. This is some area where we removed some planters. We scaled some of it down to open the space up a little bit more. We added a lot of benches. This is really the area that we want to, it's really a placemaking gathering for the community. And if you go to the next page, when we presented to the Arts Commission about 3 weeks ago, we listened to a presentation by Natalie for the about the State Street project Youth Interactive was working on. And after hearing that, we kind of regrouped a little bit, and we wanted to see how we could work with Youth Interactive and really become a part of our project. And this is one of the areas. This is a kind of a large wall along Ross, and we've tried to work an agreement with Natalie where we have, I think it's somewhere between 3 to 5 of these panels that are about 4 by 6 have and really kind of have the youth interactive group run it, but we would propose a grant in that and pay for this first round and maybe change these out every year. We're kind of developing what and how we want to do this, but we just thought it was as we try to introduce ourselves and be a big part of the fabric of the community. I think giving back a little bit and bringing that youth artist and youth interactive, as part of our main courtyard area, was an important piece to the puzzle. This is, we also have quite a bit of parking in the back, so we did want to hint some entranceways. So this is kind of in the back area where you come through to the shops along Blenders. This would be in this area right in here. So we have quite a bit of parking back here. It gets a lot of traffic, particularly for the locals who want to get in and out and get their Subway or their Blenders. So it just creates, once again, just a little bit of interest or punch at these entranceways. Once again, a little bit more of the same. And the next elevation you'll see is the elevation of Petco. And that's on the La Cumbre Street side. And once again, you'll have some highlights, kind of throughout, and you'll see that around a lot through town. But we also have the raised applied material for the bird, and some of the similar patterns that you see, from the previous slides. So once again, a pretty bland white wall. We just think this brings a lot of interest to the center. Similar detail and look, kind of large scale because the buildings are large, but kind of subtle in this motif, and they're really just a way to kind of energize and activate these portions of the center. And this is the building right across from Area 16 right here, right along Sleep Train. So it's a very large wall right along the street. I think this is a really clever design. And once again, that 1B will be with the whale, which will be offset from the building. So that'll be a painted plywood material or something similar that will be offset. We have a lot of it's almost a little bit like back of house. We have a lot of utilities and a lot of things painted on the side of this corner. So we think if we can draw some interest to this public art as opposed to our gas main lines and distribution would be a positive thing.
I've often driven by, admired the ducks there. I didn't realize in the last painting that those were getting eliminated, the birds that were.
Yeah, we had a variety of public art out there. We've had some it was butterflies, and we've had some ducks, and it was kind of a damsel in distress. We were teddy bears in the window, and we love the idea of it, and I think everyone recognizes that. We just want to bring a little more modern twist to it, and we hope that what we're presenting today will kind of bring some of those same feelings over time. Similar design. This is just going to be a painted fabric on the edge of Sleep Number. As you go to the next, you'll see frescoes. Just a popular local patio. I think will bring some great interest. To their patio. It's the same theme kind of throughout. Something that's a little unexpected. You kind of come around the corner, you see this, but there's just not a whole lot of other pieces that are visible from this one angle. But then as you come around the corner, you see the Petco bird, or then you come into the courtyard, you see these low painted planters. So trying to find, rather than a whole straight line of the public art displays, as you work through the center and as you enter in different corners and different entrances, that you find these unexpected pieces kind of throughout the project. And And you'll see on Saigon, that's a similar theme to what you've seen on a couple of the other arches and the trellis, just bringing a little different design and color to them, but a very similar theme to it.
Trellis as well as getting colors, looks like.
Yes. Just pieces of it, or, and, little spots and highlights. Similar look there. That's the same Saigon trellis area. And really, the last thing we wanted to present in the last couple of slides is that these small pops of color that would go on our new light fixtures that are all throughout the parking lot. Kind of a sense of arrival, something that's a little bit different from every other parking lot that you see. And it's really your first introduction, unless you caught a mural on your way in. This kind of gives you, the separation between the public streets and the shopping experience as you're getting started into the center. In the last slide, you'll see just a variety of the patterns that would be throughout the light poles, in the center.
Okay.
Now, we did have the opportunity, like I mentioned, to present to the Arts Advisory Commission, and Ginny is here and the project itself, I would say, was very well received. I think Ginny is here, I think, hopefully to maybe speak to that. And Natalie is here also, if there's any questions regarding our involvement with the Youth Interactive.
Okay. Does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
Okay, so we'll open public comment. We have 2 speaker slips, looks like. Sorry if I can't read the last name, but it's Natalie Jensish? Jonsak? Jonsak. Jonsak. Please come forward.
So, I went to drama school, so I'm used to projecting quite well. I represent Youth Interactive. I don't know if any of you heard of us, but we work with youth at risk. We have the first youth-led gallery in the Funk Zone. Sorry, I can't see you. We work a lot with Santa Barbara Beautiful and the Arts Commission. We were involved in the first Indigo Hotel, where our youth were empowered working with the artist to actually change and go back to college after that experience, which was huge and very transformational for them. And I think for us, the interest of getting involved in this project is this is a very public area where this potentially rotating mural will be. It's really outside Ross and where the subway is.
Is that? Oh, yeah.
So it's that eating area where everybody will be. Mm-hmm. So we were approached by the team and Ginny Brush to actually manage a rotating mural, if possible. And I think our excitement about the project is that we aim to really bring in the community involvement by having live art. We work with City College students, UCSB students, at-risk students who sign a contract that they will no longer attack Santa Barbara, and in exchange, with Santa Barbara Beautiful and other organizations, we've allowed them to sell their art and be part of murals and things that actually elevate themselves as artists rather than running away from the police, which is not good for any of us and is very costly to the city. So I think we really wanted to bring in all the different kind of schools that have art programming and keep an oversight of the quality of the art that will be there, and reach out to City College, VADR, and just keep an ongoing theme that would be agreed upon by the Arts Commission and obviously the client. So I think, I'm really in favor of this project because I think it would be very exciting for, the shoppers to see live art happening in a controlled manner, and also for the whole community to have that as a project that's kind of turning over and exciting for all. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a second speaker, Ginny Brush.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I serve as staff to City Arts Advisory. It's a little confusing, but it would actually be Arts Advisory that would be overseeing this project, not the County Arts Commission. This did come before Arts Advisory and the VAP Committee, and it was very well received, I think, in the time since then. We've determined, staff has been working to realize that we certainly see there are certain elements that are enhancements and not public art projects. So I think that was the first thing we wanted to determine and define, that there were specific areas such as the seagull on the bicycle, the whale, what's the other, I'm trying to remember the other one.
Pelican bird.
Pelican, yeah, the elements that would be
Whale.
the art elements, and leave the rest to you guys. We didn't want to get into that. So that was the idea. We would help to define what that is. The committee was very enthusiastic about the idea of the inclusion of art, and I think the colorful elements added along some very, and the fact that the trompe-l'oeil effects that were there before that have been respected in terms of using those areas for, again, the display of public art. The committee was also very enthusiastic about the engagement of the community engagement aspect of this is a project that I see functioning very well, much like the project in the Funk Zone, in which there's the rotating exhibitions on those fold-up doors. So I think it's a win-win. It gives an opportunity to refresh the space periodically, gives a lot of community engagement, and I think the art elements can be used as a great example to, I think, add a little bit more color and excitement to that shopping center, and also reflect as the idea of Santa Barbara community and placemaking and the overall kind of, whether it's our flora, fauna, the geography of the space. I think the public art elements can help reflect those. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's anyone else from the public who'd like to speak, please come forward. And seeing no one, we'll go on to questions from the board and start with Howard.
Questions?
Hearing none?
So, just curious, what kind of product do you use on the walls? I mean, is this acrylic? Is it oil? Is it epoxy? What kind of paints are you using?
It may vary a little bit depending on what part of the installation it is, and I think we would defer a little bit to the artist and what they're more comfortable working in.
Graffiti resistant? I mean, forgive my even thinking that somebody would attempt to defile this, but are they washable, or are they?
Well, the raised material is for the most part is a little bit higher than graffiti would meet. We do have the seagull on the bicycle, which is a little bit lower. We haven't really had the graffiti problem, in Five Points. It's a busy environment, which is a little bit, which does discourage it. If we have seen it, we do paint it out, immediately. Sometimes we get it more in the back of the center. We do like the idea of paint, so that if something does happen, we can come back in and touch it up and repair it. And we also hope with involvement with Youth Interactive that there's for the community that would have some graffiti to it, that there's some ownership to the center, there's some ownership to the art and the things that we're doing. So there's a little bit of faith involved in and kind of diving into what we're doing, and you do, to a certain extent, cross your fingers.
One other question. On sheet 23, you showed your edition there, and it showed that the pattern of the pilasters, painted on the pilasters, went all the way around. Am I seeing that's the one right there? Is that? I see that the pattern is actually painted on all sides. Is that true?
So this one where it doesn't.
Whereas that one does not. It's only shown on the outside face, which makes, to me, all the difference in the world.
The intent is that goes all the way around. I think that just may have been a kind of a graphical error in the presentation. The intent is that wraps those columns completely.
Is that an isolated circumstance, or is that how you would be treating most architectural elements, on just one side or all the way around?
Four-sided. All our columns that come down, everything that we hit around the bases, around our communal areas.
Planter walls.
360, all the way around, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. My questions.
Well, for example, this is a question I had too. So like here, the color doesn't wrap around. I'm wondering if that's just
On the bigger installation there, no, that would not wrap necessarily underneath, because that's such a large scale pattern that's on the front facade of that. And then because we have the insulation behind it, it kind of helps it kind of create its depth there. We don't have the bottom columns here painted, the bases, but if those bases were painted, they would go all the way around, similar to the other zones that we identified.
One other question before I totally give it up. On page 32, you show the arch colors. The keystones or the arch stones are actually articulated in color. But there again, it only is applied to the surface and doesn't go back to the glass.
That one?
It's 32 is the page.
I don't have 32 pages.
Actually,
So.
32,
It's on-
it would be the next page after that.
Here.
No, not that. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, looking at the return to the glass, it would be nice to see those colors go into the. I mean, that's a comment. Because the question is,
That's true. When I answered your question last time, I was looking more specifically at the columns. Now, sometimes that color might not wrap. We have that same arch detail kind of on the CVS.
Yes.
As you're walking down, you see that arch. We do. I have to look at our color scheme. We kind of have that blue under canopy that was called out
arch or in the
on the flat soffit,
flat
under
soffit,
soffit.
yeah.
If that's something you'd like to see, I can go back to her and our.
when it's going to go to the comment, but I just wanted to ask
Okay.
whether there's any thought given to making the arch stones, which are painted on the surface, actually go in to become volumetric rather than just surface.
We haven't, but that doesn't mean that's not something we can explore.
Thank you. That's it. I think I'm done.
All right, Amy?
Just had two questions. The first one's, have you looked at, I guess, like the larger facade of like multiple buildings all together? Because a lot of the photographs just kind of take pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just looking at sheet 25, the side of Petco, and how you kind of see that whole thing together. I'm just curious if you'd looked at these different installations kind of all next to each other.
We haven't done that. We did that a little bit on our colored elevations, even on our last time through, for the remodel. It's such a long center, and with all of our trees and without having it kind of photoshopped in, it's hard to get that long scale elevation. And part of it, how we approached it, is that you're picking up pieces as you go around, as opposed to kind of a larger mural that if you step back, you see all the pieces together.
Yeah, I was just thinking as far as just driving in, you'll see kind of a lot of them as you look down. So I was just curious if you had looked at like that view, like essentially the panoramic view. It was just a question.
We haven't created a larger scale elevation going across. We've kind of had to pick it up in the pieces and look at, because you have the low seat walls where we have the paint, and then we have some stuff that's really high.
Yeah, you wouldn't get it all, but you might get like a few things together.
We'll probably go ahead and try to do something like that, at least on the larger walls where we
Right.
had bigger installations. We took a step back and made sure we got the whole side of Petco, the whole side of Sleep Train, the whole side of Big Five, where you had several pieces together, particularly on larger scale areas.
And then the only other question I had was on 27, just the illustration of the whale. Are most of those are what you were talking about as far as putting on plywood, or would those also just be painted directly on?
The whale is called out to be a marine plywood or similar,
So like applied.
similar material. So it would be offset. It would be on clips to give you a little bit of depth where that whale sits out as more of an enhancement, as opposed to the paint that's on the background of it. We thought about it just being paint, and we just found that with all the variety of things that's going on, and particularly on that elevation with our utilities, just create a little bit of depth, a little different material, and kind of changed it, to try to, make a nice improvement there as opposed to just being paint really throughout. We wanted to bring something more than just paint, on some of these items. And as we kind of increased the scale of this thing and then we started to bring more areas of the center in, it became obvious that we needed to bring some other component to it, because the scope just kind of kept growing on us as we kind of got more and more into it.
Okay. That was all I had.
Okay, Courtney?
I should mention here that I did meet with Ginny privately after this item was reviewed at the Visual Arts in Public Places and Arts Advisory Board. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, so we met to review the project and talk about what her board had commented on. So I did get a look at this previously. Could you run us through just kind of the overall goal and intent of this project one more time?
Sure. Well, one thing as a company, what we're looking at, I mean, we own shopping centers, and almost everything we own has a grocery store component to it. So as just a broader scale approach to how we want to own and operate our shopping centers, we're looking at what opportunities that we have to integrate more with the community when we redevelop a center, or what can we do to enhance, to make some place-making opportunities. That's why we really focus, on our courtyard area, our patio spaces, and as part of that, we always wanted to do something more other than just kind of fix what was broken on the project. And until we got that done, we could never really, take the next step and kind of bring this art component to the center. It was always the intent, but when you look at the center now, great, we spent all this money, all this time, and we fixed everything and kind of just put it back together. And, it's by integrating more with the community, creating these gathering spaces, it's just a company goal, wide goal to kind of go, above and beyond. We haven't done too much of this. We've hired some consultants to really kind of help us do this, to try to.
So is the intent to bring more customers to the center? Is it just to give it some liveliness?
Well, I think that's part of it. I mean, I think, people, they have the opportunity. This is a busy center already.
Mm-hmm. You said, yeah.
So, there's a lot of traffic all the way throughout the day. And, when we're right in the middle of construction and parking was even tougher, I think when people come in and they see some of the improvements, they see some of the effort, if they drive around a little bit longer to find a parking stall, or it can change your mindset a little bit. It can disarm you a little bit. You're coming in off of State Street, you take a right into the shopping center, 3 people honk at you because your baby's crying in the back, and you finally get your parking stall. And, it should be a community environment. And we want it to be disarming. We want it to be comfortable. So there's a lot of things that we look at as an operator to, certainly drive sales. That certainly helps. But
Sure.
You do that by, bonding with the community. And
Okay. Because we recently saw, the other part of this, I guess, same project come through this board in terms of, upgrading the existing facility.
Mm-hmm.
So when that project was before you, did you consider whether or not to implement this kind of branding effort as part of that project? I'm looking at things like paint applications that look like tile. Mm-hmm. And wondering, why wasn't that included on the previous project as a tile piece rather than a painted application, which is what we're looking at now?
Brief response, please, because we need to
And
get
I have
this
a lot of
moving along.
questions.
Well, we always had a budget as part of the project to come back and make some enhancements, to create some branding, and to do this. We just weren't prepared at that point during the project. So now that works, heavy lifting's kind of done on the project, we can take our time and make sure we get this component correct.
Okay. There's a couple of specific questions I have. On sheet 11, this is the Zone 1 Wall 2 detail with the chevron pattern. There's an object or painting that's set back underneath that overhang. Is that intended to be a hanging object, or is it painted on the wall?
That's a hanging object.
Okay.
That's offset from the wall, and I think that's a
A
fabric.
rotating mural, or is that just a decorative panel?
The rotating mural?
Is that's my question. Is that well? I'll go. Never mind. I'm out of turn. Sorry. Go ahead.
So hanging. Have you identified the specific areas where art will be happening versus paint?
Yes.
Or are
And-
you looking to us for that input?
Well, this is where what we're proposing is exactly that here. I mean, is the paint and the enhancements,
But throughout the center, within this package, what do you consider to be our purview versus what is considered an actual mural art piece that you might work on with Youth Interactive or an actual local artist?
I think it's a gray area where the paint becomes a little bit of the art. So I would think if the board members had serious issue with certain portions of the paint, that we need to take that into consideration. But it's the scope of the entire project is what we want to try to bring in, and certainly.
Well, I think that's an important distinction, and it's a question I had as well. If there are portions of the project that are going to be rotating art. That's what I'm hearing. It's community generated rotating art. These are panels that are placed on the wall or it's painted on the wall. But it's something it's designed by the community. It's being painted by youth in some cases, or maybe in every case. That's something distinct from this kind of treatment on the architecture, which is very much our purview. So if and we've gone through several art in public places proposals where they define an area or a size of a panel and say within this dimension, there's going to be public art created, and we even give them the total freedom to determine what that is. But that's very different from this kind of thing. So that's something that we need to have clarified. But I'm going to let other questions.
I think I
go
can
for
do
it. You can
10 seconds to clarify
Okay.
that.
All right.
Everything that you see here is intended to be permanent art. There's only one area that is the 4x6 panels in the center courtyard,
Okay.
which would be our interaction with Youth Interactive, and
Okay.
maybe a rotating art.
And local artists. Okay. Thank you.
So you're considering everything in this package, with the exception of those panels, to be, you're calling it art.
Yes.
I think that's all I have.
Okay. Scott.
Is the intent to do everything in this package, or is this a grab bag and you may do some of these things?
The intent is to do it all.
Okay. Only question?
Tip.
No questions.
Oh, you know what? I have one more.
Okay.
How do you see this working in with your current signage and your tenant signage? Because what I'm seeing is a bit of clashing in terms of some of your tenant signage and some of the colors we're looking at.
Well, I think if you flip through it, you'll see, like this whole mural here on the side of Big Five, as you turn the corner, their signage is on the front. We don't have any art installation or any paint color change into their sign facade. Same with Ross, same with all of our shops, like around Frescoes where we had the lizard motif and set off. Their sign is on the front. This is around the corner. The whale that's floating on La Cumbre, once again, on the street side, Sleep Train signage is on the front. The Petco facade, and as you turn around the back, that's all on the side.
Okay.
Where Petco,
I think we got it. Got it. All right. So we'll go into, unless you had another question.
No, that's it.
Okay. Comments. Howard.
I think this is a very refreshing proposal, and I think it'll work. And the fact that it draws from the community and it is so colorful and imaginative and creative is very positive. I also noted that you took a lot of trouble not to have conflict between the art and the signage. Actually, those two are different places. But I did have a couple of things, and one is the animals are great. The one thing I thought about is that the whale has this airplane underneath it. I don't understand the airplane. I understand the whale. End of comment. The archstones, I think, should be 3D. I think they should go in and create volume. I think that what makes your proposal work is that there is a great deal of white space, and I should say spaciousness, between the various pieces. So it isn't just impacting the whole project, all the buildings, all the facades. There's enough breathing room so that when you glance at it, out of the corner of your eye, you see this little thing happening, and it's curious and interesting and kind of friendly. I especially like the, I guess, what do you call them, the refracted light or the kind of prismatic shapes of pastel colors on different facades of the building. I think that's very, very good. I think the trellis, at first I didn't like it, but I think it's going to be, like, you look up there and say, what the heck is happening up there? It's very, very imaginative. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Yeah, I like the proposed project. I think that with, like Howard was saying, the community involvement and also just the use of pattern in the scale, especially on sheet 17, I think that pattern is really successful. And I also agree that it would be nice at like the arches and at the columns you've already said that you're going to do that, but to have it be three-dimensional so that it's painted all the way around. I do think probably just for a benefit to you and seeing the whole thing, doing a panoramic of the entire, just for your use, so you can sort of see where things are and how they relate to one another, would be just beneficial for the project. And yeah, I think that I like the illustrations and the graphics. I actually like the way that it looks, the whale looks painted on, because it sort of wraps the downspouts or in the conduit. But I think either way, it'll be interesting. So those are all my comments.
Okay, Scott.
You gonna skip me?
Courtney,
Skip
I'm
Courtney.
sorry. Courtney, of course. How could I miss
How
you?
could you forget? So there are a few things I do like about this project. I like the intent of it. I like that you've introduced some really unique, I guess, art components to the property. I like the whimsy of it. I like the bright colors. I like that you're working with Youth Interactive. I think that's a great partnership, and that should be promoted. I think there are a couple of areas that are problematic. The first one being, if you could flip to the previous page, areas where you're proposing these very bold graphic paint applications on the very large exterior street-facing building elevations. I don't believe we have anything like this within our city, and I don't think it's appropriate. On the tail end of that, what we're looking at underneath that arcade, if that were to be an art piece, a mural, something that's unique, I would be in favor of that. And I do like that as a component throughout your project. So what's confusing for me is looking at your package where you have the things like the whale and the pelican and these different animals. They look like something that I've seen before. So I wonder, is that what the final proposal includes, or are you going to entertain bringing on individual artists for each of those pieces and having those be unique? So I guess that's a question also that I didn't get to ask before.
Well, we're interviewing artists now, and for each individual pieces of it.
So the whale, for example, may not be a whale. It might be something else.
No, it would be a whale.
So then the artists are just...
This is representative of, you know, the artist and our Hollis branding that is, and they work on a number of different projects that kind of bring, so they work with the artists early on. We come up with their design, and this is what you should expect to see. You know,
so the artists have already been engaged,
project.
and this is the end product that we're looking at.
Right, but there's artists that will be hired, you know, and contracted for to actually do the installation. But the company that we worked with, Hollis, they are artists as well. So we kind of come through and develop the, you know, kind of this modern Spanish motif and the design components to it, as opposed to having, you know, if you have 10 different artists, you're going to have a lot of different things show up. So we developed the theme, the patterns, the general modern Spanish motif, and then hire the artist to, you know, design and paint, final paint and installation of the product.
Okay, the other things that I think we may want to revisit are areas where we have small patterns that look like tile but are in fact paint. I think the planters and work that you've done recently on the landscaping does a great job in creating space, in creating, you know, community, and it does its job as architecture should. So some of those smaller applications, I think, are a little less obtrusive in terms of public view, but I'm questioning, I guess, the material. But overall, I do like this project. I like the idea behind it. I just think what we're looking at doesn't quite hit the mark.
Thank you. Scott?
What you have is basically a big vanilla shopping center, so I think it needs improvement, it needs more color, it needs more architectural detail. So I think this project is really hitting those points well. I think I agree with some of the earlier comments that maybe that can be done more architectural. Maybe that can be done more architectural. I think paint is great, tile would be better. I know there were concerns about shopping carts and maybe the tile has a bumper or some way it's recessed, so that's not an issue. So maybe the cart hits the coping before the tile. I think that tile would really bring it home as opposed to the paint. But the colors and the patterns are very tastefully done, very nice enhancement. There were a few things I thought were just a little odd. One was I agree that the kind of refracted-looking mosaic is great. I don't really understand the need for this projected element here. It feels, I kind of get it, but it feels at odds with the chimney, and maybe that we're all handled in a more subtle fashion. I think these things are
you have to move it over.
So it's under
I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Here we go.
This one little piece I find a little odd. These things are really, really cute. They're probably too cute for adults. And I think that would be at 18 inches height for kids, and maybe spread around so you have to kind of find them. Might be kind of fun.
That was some of the prior public art that was, it showed what it was existing or prior.
And this, for example, I think is very handsome. It would be great if that were an architectural element, like tile perhaps. And I think one other item, you may run afoul of the signage code. So it looks like you're sneaking in your 5 Points logo into a lot of places. And for me, I found that a little off-putting. I'd rather just see the art.
What page?
Page 25.
25, but it occurs in a number of areas, that repetition of the logo pattern.
But on the whole, I think it's a marvelous addition. I think you're heading in the right direction, and I find the artwork very pleasing.
Thank you. If I can just, some of the comments on the tile, I mean, we started with some of the
We're
tile.
going to go, we need to,
Fair
I'm
enough.
sorry to interrupt, but we need to go on to
Sure.
comments from the board. Go ahead, Tip.
You know, overall, you know, I think that it's a good project, and I think it's a good project because number one is on Upper State Street, it's out of the downtown, which I think that should work. Number two, as Scott mentioned, the building is very non-descriptive. It's a vanilla box. It's almost as boring as it gets. So I think it helps. However, I feel that if you're asking, you know, how many of us, 7 of us, what works and what doesn't work, you probably have different opinions on everything. And so it's asking us to comment on your artwork is almost you never have a consensus. You know, I like certain thing and Scott likes certain things, and same as Howard. So it's a difficult issue. The only thing I want to break down into two kind of things I see here. Number one is art, all the pieces, the whale and things like that. And then number two is all the painting you are doing to the I call architectural elements, like the arches, the columns. Those I think that it should be more uniform, should be three-dimensional. It should work because those to work with the building. But all the art pieces is something else, in my opinion. And I like them, so that's both of my comments.
Stephanie.
I feel a little different about this and the rest of the board. I don't think that most of this is appropriate for this building. I feel like that the enhancements that have been most recently completed have classed up the place, and I think that this is veering it off into a dated direction that you just came from, and I don't find it an enhancement. I think that I don't particularly like the murals, and I don't particularly like the architectural elements that are accentuated with paint. I think that the lower wall accents around the planters are acceptable, and the mural installations by students in inset walls, such as recessed into these alcoves.
Shift it over.
Which one? Okay.
So inset in this area here, or as you have the murals attached to the walls would be acceptable, but on this outside face, it just is way too much. I think that the building, if you want to enhance these buildings, I think you should take some clues from what's been done at La Cumbre Plaza with planters and landscaping. And my mic just fell off. Adding additional life and color with landscaping would bring this into a more colorful realm with Santa Barbara style. Some of the smaller art installations like the butterflies or small little accents would be acceptable, but I find most of what's presented is not an enhancement to this building.
Okay, thank you for your comments. So I'll just tag on to that a little bit. I agree with Stephanie that this large-scale treatment of architectural elements like you've done here is just, it's not an enhancement to the building, but that the recessed portions could be painted with murals or with bright color or something, and it would be an enhancement. In contrast, I think these kind of lost corners where you're adding, I know this is not a very visible corner of the building, but it does get some traffic, so to have a mural happening in that corner to me is not offensive. Even if I don't particularly care for some of the elements of the mural, I'd say in that location it's okay. That's this one here, page 10.
The Pelican.
Which
The Pelican.
location is it?
Page
What
10, the
elevation, or
Pelican.
Store, front, or something?
Big 5, I think.
It says at the top which area of the site
I'm only
that is.
asking for so that the minutes reflect it.
He just said the Pelican.
It's the Pelican on page 10, if we go by this handout that's been presented. Is that okay? Because there's a lot of, if I try and identify every single location.
I'm just
it will
saying,
be-
if you could just say the store so
Big
that when
five.
the minutes are
It's
read.
Big
we
five.
know.
Big
Thank
five.
you.
And I also completely agree with Stephanie's comment about using the logo repeatedly on the building in different ways and subtle and not so subtle ways. I think that's completely not appropriate. It's signage and should not be used. I think the planters painting the planters, I think it's okay. I think it's, the patterns that are chosen could be more interesting, could be more colorful, could be more traditional, because you do have a very traditional building here. But I think, it's acceptable. If most board members found it to be acceptable, I would go along with it. And I agree with the comment about trying to imitate tiles with some of the paint applications, like on page 14, where you've got a little orange detail there that's sort of made to look like a tile, but really isn't. It's paint. Again, this particular graphic, this is page 15. Because it's recessed back from the front of the building, it's shown elsewhere, recessed, how it's recessed.
16.
15.
But on page 16, it's shown.
16, you can see it.
That it's acceptable because it's unobtrusive, visually unobtrusive, and doesn't impact the main impact of the building. And similarly with these patterns on the back walls, even though they look kind of, factory, something you might see at, Bed Bath & Beyond or something like that, if that's what you want to do to these recessed areas, I'd be okay with that. And I think these columns are interesting in this particular location, which, again, it's not the main entrance. It's not front and center to the building. I think that's okay if you want to do some columns like that. But this, again, here's this repetition of the logo pattern, I'd say is unacceptable. To me, the one thing that's acceptable on this side of the building that you're showing is the bird. And if you did the bird without these kind of, again, very generic sort of patterning, I think it would be an enhancement. It would be a nice feature on the building, especially if it was set off, it was cut out plywood and painted. This to me is not an enhancement at all, page 26. And I agree with comments made about the whale. If I had noticed that they were painting over those birds when they painted this building, I would have been against it, because I think that was a real art piece, the way that was done. It's really beautifully rendered birds. This to me looks like a graphic that you would get off the internet. And to me, it's not art. Let's say it's kind of a low grade art, and something that's right on the street, facing the street on a very visible portion of the building. To me, it's not acceptable. I can go on. I think this this paint treatment is just not appropriate. I think there's other ways you could enhance the building other than an iguana or a gecko painted very large on a flat surface like that. The previous painting that was done there with these birds, which is very subtle, and they were well done, I think something like that is okay, but this to me is not okay. So I could go on, but what I would suggest is, if other board members are okay with it, is that we form a subcommittee, maybe a couple of board members who would work with the applicant and discuss, each of these specifically and how they might appropriately be done or what could be done, as opposed to just sending you away with a lot of negative comments without much help. Howard.
I actually believe they're just two negative comments. And that's number one, and number two. And number two is, I don't think I would have a problem micromanaging artists, wherever they come from.
Okay.
And I think it's a little overkill. I think if we could set some guidelines and maybe some goals, generic goals, that they could somehow get the point. For example, the use of tile or paint colors that resemble tile, maybe in the planters. That's a direction, that's a goal. They could probably do that. to say that the iguana's wrong and that the bird is wrong and the whale, the whale is the whale. But I think the subcommittee would be over-managing it.
Okay.
I have a suggestion. The applicant has said that the only portion of this whole project that's considered a collaboration with Youth Interactive is the 4 panels, right? I would suggest that we further categorize the rest of the applications as either paint color or mural, and then the latter being something that has subject matter. So any of the animals would fall in the mural category, and anything that's considered a mural should be reviewed by Arts Advisory Board. Anything that's considered paint application should be reviewed by this board.
We have
Any other
reviewed murals in the
suggestions?
past.
Well, yeah.
Someone can make a motion.
Yeah.
Do we have a subcommittee for the art down in the funk zone? Remember that?
No, we
Oh,
didn't.
but it was
No, we didn't.
temporary.
No, we
What's
didn't.
that?
And-
Temporary. This is
But-
I
permanent.
see.
So
Is this permanent?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
until you die?
Until it gets changed or approved to be
Maybe,
changed.
maybe even more permanent.
Permanent.
I think
I
to
guess-
say that they're artists is a little disingenuous. We're talking about
Right.
a branding company, and the same person has done everything.
Right.
It's the same hand throughout.
Or a couple of people have
Yeah.
worked on it, but it is. It's the graphic quality it's had. So I think it is a misnomer to say that this is an art piece, or all these applications are art pieces. It's architectural painting of a building, and yes, there's artistry involved and design involved, but this is not like a public mural. So what's the pleasure of the board? Would someone like to make a motion?
What is the action that we're required to take?
We can, if sufficient.
It's just concept review.
It's concept review, right?
Doesn't it say action can be taken?
Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
I think there's a few areas that are more controversial than others. And I think the chevron pattern on the one arcade is controversial. And I think the larger murals...
Is this a motion, by the way?
Sure, it's a motion.
Please make a
Okay. The murals facing the public way are the more controversial items. And I feel, as one, I would need to see those well, this is in pretty good context here, but maybe up and down the street, how they all work together, a broader elevation. For instance, the Petco has a large mural, and that's all on the same streetscape, correct? The bird?
Correct, but we're hundreds of feet, between, the back of Petco all the way through the back of, the back of Sleep Train, so it's perspective there.
Well, I think...
So if this is a motion, we should start with specific items, right? So
It's a difficult thing to do.
It is. So and you said there are controversial aspects. Do you want to list them?
The controversial aspects are the chevron pattern in the arcade and the larger murals facing the public way. I think that...
Should those be restudied?
I think that they should be restudied, and if you want to continue with the path you've chosen, I think perhaps greater documentation is in order, other views from different parts of the street. I think the majority of the board finds the tile pattern of the planters acceptable. And in general, the murals on the interior portions of the center are acceptable.
3D architectural elements, recommend. It's like
Hold on.
Yeah.
Let's
We
finish
have
the motion.
one person making a motion. You can, under discussion, we can.
I think the applicant should consider use of architectural materials to form the arch coin patterns.
Can you be more specific?
Well, there's two large arches that have,
But when you say architectural
well, tile or stone, perhaps,
tile or stone,
or a raised plaster detail at the very least. And I think the majority of the board finds that the 5-point logo intertwined in the artwork is not acceptable. And I'll leave it at that, and whoever's seconding can add to that motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
I have another comment. to add.
Under discussion, Howard.
So on sheet 17, you could maybe turn to that and show it on the screen. Yeah, the back wall is actually a pattern of large arrows, which have nothing to do with Spanish history or motifs or whatever. And I think that the Spanish motif that is on the above fresco with the iguana actually is delicate, very light. It's kind of interesting. It's a subtle piece. I wish that this pattern here could be less kind of abstract. The arrows have nothing to do with, and also the chevron pattern actually is something that appears in Islamic architecture a lot. I don't find it objectionable.
So can we summarize?
Yeah,
by saying,
well, I've said it. I think that I'd like to see this one be changed. This on 17.
Pattern, so you'd like to see it be more traditional?
More traditional.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's right.
Wouldn't know how to say that myself.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Under discussion.
Under discussion, one of the items mentioned was the tile pattern at the planters. I don't feel the majority of the board is in support of that.
Okay, all right. I misunderstood.
So that also needs to be restudied.
I think
Can we
we
give
can
them a
revise
suggestion?
it to be, paint at planters. I don't know. Don't make it look like tile. I guess revisit the paint application at the planters. And
Chair?
It's not a color problem. It's a pattern problem.
it's a pattern
Restudy
problem
the
for
patterns.
me, yes. It's intended to look like tile, and it's not tile. So I have no problem with the pattern as long as it doesn't look like a tile, if that makes sense.
Yes.
There are also two other items in the package that we didn't really review or discuss. Lighting, is that part of this proposal? I saw an image.
No, there's no lighting.
It says additional lighting.
Oh, in the trees.
In the trees? That's not part of this? Is that part of your project?
No, it won't be part of the project.
Okay, and then the banners in the parking lot on the light standards, is that something that we need to comment on?
Yes.
So I don't really have any comments on that.
Well, okay,
think we
you
need
did
to
add
discuss
one
it.
item, and we're still under discussion on the motion. Do you want to comment on the banners? You're going to say the banners are acceptable as
In
part of
my
the
eye, they're
motion?
acceptable.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have a motion now.
Is it just continued, indefinite continuance? Because nothing was stated.
Yeah. Definite continuance, unless you want to try and come back in 2 weeks with a revised proposal. But-
Probably full.
I think that agenda is full, so
Okay.
indefinite would be better.
Okay, I mean, we can also add that the mural, the 4x6 murals proposed to be done by local youth artists, it is acceptable as proposed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Two opposed. Motion carries. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for attending.
Oh, yeah, one of these. Perfect. But the rest
Well, that is a question. I don't think we could have a second.
Yep.
But
Can I give this to you?
Well, I can recycle it. I just don't know if you keep it reuse the pages or recycle them here.
Keep the larger site plans.
So we're on to item 6, 3869 State Street.
Can we just finish clearing the table first?
Yeah, sure.
Sit in on this one? Yep, sit in my seat.
Sorry. That's the next one. That's the next step here. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair? I'd like to, before you start,
Go ahead,
make
yeah.
a few comments.
Mhm.
Okay. This project is under review right now by city staff, and we have a June 24th show hearing scheduled. And they have a tight timeline for their project, and they can talk about that a bit. But since it's a housing authority project, trying to get them to the show hearing before July 1st, and coordinating the ABR review within those parameters is something that we need to work on. Once you review it, I'd like to talk about the schedule for the next ABR hearing after this one. So we'll get into that in more detail at that time.
Okay.
And also, the show hearing is in regard to the parking modification only. So you'll be looking at the design, not the parking. We go to the show, we'll be talking about the parking and not the design. Just want to clarify the purview.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So just for the public, this is a proposal to demolish an existing church and two-story building and construct an affordable senior rental housing development on a 45,000 square foot lot. The project consists of a three-story residential building with 57 one-story, one-bedroom units, manager's unit, and about 2,000 square feet of community space, offices, and laundry facilities. And it's in the Priority Housing Overlay District, and it's coming under the AUD program, where a maximum of 63 units per acre is allowed. And it was reviewed by this board
March 30th.
March 30th, thank you, this year. And we had a number of comments, which I think I'll read out after you introduce yourselves and the project.
Sure. Deddy Piker with RRM Design Group.
Lisa Plowman with RRM Design Group.
And Skip Samansky with the Housing Authority, City of Santa Barbara.
In the interest of time, it might be simpler for me to read the comments and then walk you through each of the things that we did to address those comments.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Briefly, to follow up from Kathy's comments, the planner, that this is a project that's going in for tax credit applications. They do two tax credit applications a year in March and in July. So that's why we're trying to get this one into the July application.
Okay.
All right, so
Does that, let me just make sure I understand it. Does that mean that they need an approval from us today?
No, they need their main approval, which is from you, before July 1st. So it would be
A final?
It would be project design approval. They would
Before
need
July 1st, they need a PDA.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
what we're kind of looking for today would be to say that the project is ready for design approval. Then it'll go to the show, and then presumably we could come back on consent for that approval or come back to the full board.
Okay.
On 629.
629.
There's only consent.
Oh, I see, that's
There's
only
only
consent. So yeah, we really have to,
There's only consent?
on
Available.
629 prior to, yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh.
between the show hearing, which is on the 24th, and July 1st, there's just one ABR meeting, and it's a consent hearing. So either today, if you're ready for PDA, or at another hearing in 2 weeks, if you could state at that point, it's ready, but you won't be giving it, and that you will allow the person on consent
I
to
see.
give the PDA.
Okay, now I think I got it. Is that the third time you said that?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
so again, this is, I believe the third time that we've come forward with the project. And the last meeting, you made a number of comments that we've tried to address in the current version of these plans. I won't go through the whole affordable housing for low-income seniors, et cetera, and other details of the project description. I think easiest would be for me just to read the comments and then walk you through what we did to address them. So comment number 1 was, some board members found the eastern facade monolithic. Study splitting the facade or adding variety in forms and or in colors to reduce the monolithic appearance. So let's flip to the elevation sheet. This is the west elevation at the bottom of the sheet, and it shows how we, let me see, I'm going to use that. I'm sorry. The east elevation does relate to that. Sorry, I
wonder if we should bring out the last set so we can compare and see how you made changes.
That sounds good. So primarily the changes that we made here had to do with the center sections here, the section that splits the facade into sort of 3 pieces, really, when you take the center section. And then we made some modifications to the way in which the balconies were treated and the way in which we treated the windows here. And I believe we got rid of the arch at the top and completely redid, the sort of roof element of the main center lobby section of the project. Take a look at that. Let's see. And then I do have
Which is which?
There was the center section.
the center section that's changed. And then, I think we had some awnings previously. Now we're extending these, cantilevering these canopies out over the window areas there. But I think that what we did was we did a rendering of that.
This is the State Street side, right? This side?
That's the State Street end, right? So we did a rendering just to, I think it kind of gives you a better feel for what's going on with the movement and articulation in the facade. So, we changed the roof here and created this flat roof area instead of the kind of arched roof that we had previously. We have the balconies showing here that are connected to the interior kind of lobby areas there. And I think the rest of it is, it's pretty similar to what we had before. We do have some variations in the height of the facade of the parapets up here. But I think, the idea for doing the rendering was just to give you kind of a sense of the actual kind of movement that you don't really see in just the flat elevation there.
Would these be plaster face and plaster?
Those would be plaster, yeah.
And these elements here, these verticals?
Those would be probably the same treatment as the face here, probably wood treatment or something like that. We haven't really designed that yet, but something along those lines.
So the rails are wood railings?
Yeah, not actual wood, but cement fiber board. Yeah, with
Textured?
spaces in between.
Textured? Or?
I haven't quite gotten that level of detail, but right now I think they'd probably be smooth finish.
And they're supported by metal?
Yes, metal railings behind.
And what is the building element there on each side of the entrance that kind of projects with the tall window in it? What material is that?
That's stucco.
This is stucco here?
I'm sorry. This will be covered, will be faced with the same material.
Same material as the railing here?
Yes.
And then this color here as opposed to this color, is that just two different shades of stucco?
No,
I think that's just one. All of the stucco elements will be one shade.
This color is the same as this color.
He's
This is gray. Those are 2 different colors, right?
But they're stucco.
Yeah.
Same finish.
Same finish, but different color code.
Are we into questions?
Could we look at the plan?
Okay, so we
Not
can
into questions.
carry on.
Or unless,
Comment, can you go through all the comments?
That's what he's
Yeah,
doing.
I'll continue on with that. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the second comment here was number 2, a study showing more variation of the roof line similar to the south elevation. So the south elevation, I'm not sure what that comment really meant, and you can see a lot of variation in the roof line there, but you can see that we are moving up and down with the parapets to create that variation. And you could kind of see it better even in that three-dimensional sketch.
Maybe they meant the north elevation.
They meant the north.
North elevation, right.
Yes.
Right.
Because
And
you've got
This
right.
was
that kind
the
of
one
stepping.
that was heavily discussed previously, and you could see the difference if you bring that in. No, this one over here.
That's the south.
You could see the difference. They wanted more movement in this elevation and said refer back to this one.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, since we have, it's a 3-story building, the only place where we have been able to, step it down and maintain our goal in terms of the number of units, et cetera, was in the front there. There's no other location where we could, without actually losing a unit, where we could do any further stepping like that. Provide larger scale drawings. I think hopefully the renderings kind of accomplish that goal. Number 4 was provide some light into the corridor between buildings. And I'm not sure what that comment meant exactly, because we really just have one building, so I'm not sure what it meant.
Are there corridors?
There are internal corridors, interior.
Provide light into the corridors between buildings.
I think that was Howard. But,
Yeah, we don't really have that opportunity, except at the end of this corridor, we do have glazing at the end there. And then, of course, we have light coming, we have a wall of glazing here that provides light into these lobby lounge areas.
And skylights are not an option.
Well, you potentially, I suppose, we could do something on the 3rd floor. Yeah. Restudy the middle parapet to be similar in style to the rest of the building, and we just looked at that. So, number 6 was restudy the west elevation and show west side trees and details on the plans. We show on the landscape plan the trees, but primarily what we did with this elevation is we broke it up into these sort of 3 major components by reworking this center section here and then moving the parapets up and down a little bit more to get a little more articulation there than what we had previously. I think that's that. Provide community garden details and information. So the community garden has been there for a number of years. There is an easement over it.
Can you show us where that is in the
Sure.
plan?
The ownership and control of these properties is complicated, to say the least.
But this site is owned by the Housing Authority.
The whole property is owned by the Housing Authority, but some of this, but this portion actually has an easement over it that would allow someone who controls a building adjacent to put parking on that space. But that hasn't happened in any number of years and probably never will. So it is available and will probably continue to be available as a community garden.
Is it
You
being
can see
worked
it.
now?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Has been and will continue to operate that way unless by some
Well,
chance.
there's complicated lease agreements between adjacent property owners. I mean, it's not complicated, but there's layers of them. And the building at the back, which is now AC4 Fitness, has a lease agreement with the neighboring property owner. If that expires and isn't renewed in 2026, they have the ability to develop that garden area as extra parking. But the goal is to get that lease extended.
In short, there's 35 spaces available here. They're good through 2028. If they go away, the parking spaces from here can be taken up with the community garden. So again, that lease is good through 2028, which are these parking spaces. But the person that controls this is good through 2035. So we're negotiating to get this lease extended so that we have no issues with the community garden.
Okay.
But again, you know, the community garden isn't really a required part of our project. It's on the property, and it is a community garden, which will be greatly beneficial, and then the future will be resolved, at some point down the road. The next comment was had to do with trying to get a little more landscape space in front of the building. And fortunately, we were able to, analyze what the actual layout of the existing parking was, and we had the ability to move the sidewalk in or out away from the building and quite significantly increase the amount of landscaping in front of the building. As you can see here, we just had like a couple of feet previously, and now we have as much as 9'4" here in front of this part of the building. So that was really fortuitous that we were able to make that work. So I think we kind of really accomplished that goal. And you can see on the landscape plan that it gives us the ability to get some trees into those spaces there. We also incorporated permeable paving. That was number 9. Study incorporating permeable paving or alternative material, and that's what we're doing for these parking spaces that are part of the project. And then again, the study minimizing the walkway in front of the buildings and get more landscape, and you just saw how that worked out. And I think the other comment, number 11, pertains to the same point, which was maybe do angled parking or something, which really wasn't necessary in order to get the additional landscape there. So I think that covers all the comments that were made. And if there's anything to add to that.
I think the only other thing that we did was we had to add 3 feet at the front for additional right-of-way along State Street to meet the pedestrian master plan. So we had to push the building back. So now the sidewalk will be able to be widened up there, similar to what's happening in front of the Mirasol. So we still meet our 10-foot setback, though. Yeah. And do you want to show where our spaces, our common open space?
Sure. Plans. So our common open space occurs on the roof of the second story here at the front. So this is a place that will be like an outdoor terrace for the residents to utilize, and you'll have great mountain views, etc., out over the roadway here and over the parking lot. But we also have these terraces on the both the second and the third level.
Little decks,
outdoor decks, in front of these lounge areas here that will also be amenity spaces for the residents there. So I think that covers it. Yeah. And happy to answer questions.
All right. Well, we have, that concludes your presentation. We'll go on to public comment. And we just have one speaker slip. Kip Bradley, you could come forward, take a seat. Hello.
Hi, Chairman. My name is Kip Bradley. We are actually the, master lessee. If you can show me that site plan, I can point out where we are. In this building right here. And a couple of, actually 3 different comments that I would have today. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised by the urgency of this, where they say, well, we've got to have this done by July 1st because goodness knows there's a deadline for funding and so on and so forth. I hate to tell you, but I've been in front of this board many, many times with the gun to my head that my bank was going to pull the loan. But somehow that didn't sway you guys to push me any faster, any slower otherwise. So I would just encourage you to take whatever time is necessary as opposed to feeling like, well, you got to do this because heaven forbid we should lose our money and so forth. I've been in that spot. There will be funding in the next month, the next time around. So I would encourage you to do the best job possible. I think Lisa was absolutely also correct. It's a little bit of a hornet's nest with respect to the leases and the parking agreements and the easements and all those sort of things. And the hard part that we have is that we are the ones who are the beneficiary of the parking up to here. And so because of that, we're looking at this project and kind of going, you're going to approve a project that is going to create a quagmire of parking nightmare. Because our tenant uses this parking, and if suddenly you're putting on a project, because our agreement is that the church can use this property all they want on Sundays and holidays, and we are in full agreement with that. However, for this kind of a project that is now kind of a 24/7 type of deal, you're really, really creating a big burden on us, because this parking, while they may say, oh gosh, we have 61 or 63 or whatever number of units and we'll only have 10 parking, just like Skip was joking the last time, hey, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm kind of getting to that age that I'll be wanting to look at this seriously. I can assure you Skip's not going to give up his car. And so these folks will want more than 17 spaces in order to accommodate a 63-unit complex.
So if I could just
sure.
understand what you're saying. I understand. You're talking about the fact when this lease agreement for this area expires and they're not able to use this parking, or are you talking about just the way that it's proposed right now?
I'm talking about for the next 20-plus years.
My question is, are you objecting to what's being proposed in terms of parking right now?
Yes.
Okay, well, a good time to bring that up would be at the staff hearing.
24th.
The 24th, yes.
That's correct.
Because I'm just mentioning that's going to be the appropriate spot to bring that up.
And we plan to do that, yes, but I'm also talking to you from a perspective of design that a 63-unit complex, I'm sorry? 58 unit complex on this is going to create a great deal of burden on the parking problem.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
All right, thanks. There's anyone else from the public who'd like to comment? Seeing none, we'll go on to questions from the board. Stephanie.
My question has to do with the trees along the western side of the property, and still weren't shown. Are they going to be maintained or not?
You're talking about
the pine trees.
The pine trees. I think the objective is to try and maintain them, but we're not sure if they can be maintained. We went out there the other day and we're looking at them, and right now they're fenced on the side of Mirasol.
Arborist report?
There's no arborist report, no. I mean, the trees are, I think, in decent health, but whether or not they can be preserved through the construction is the question.
How close are you to them?
They sort of straddle the property line, actually, so, yeah. They're right over in here. Right in here. So they're not being shown as being preserved on this, I don't think. Yeah.
Are those trees in the fingers of the parking lot proposed? Are they existing?
These trees?
Yes.
They're proposed. There's some over here.
You know what, they're not shown with an X in them, you guys. So they are shown as we were preserving them.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think there was a question when we were out in the field as to whether that could actually be accommodated with the construction. Because they're directly adjacent to the...
So there's just two?
I think there's 2 or 3. I can't quite
Do you have
tell.
a survey here or another plan that shows them?
We have the survey.
They're right here, at the front of the site.
Yeah, on the aerial, it looks like they're kind of right on straddling the property.
They are straddling the property line.
If the community garden was to go away, how close is your building to the property line at the south side?
Well, there is no
There's no
property
property
line there. So right now, you have the community garden is on the property with the housing. So there is a...
But if that community garden was to go away and the other neighboring all the lease agreements went away, evaporated.
And he built
and then
parking.
put parking there. Is there any buffer?
Well, it would be a parking lot that would have a landscape plan and landscape buffers. And right
But
now,
in other words,
we're
there's-
about 10 feet or so away from.
You're 10 feet away. Yeah.
Approximately from the
That's it.
area that is
That's all my
designated.
questions.
Yeah.
Okay, Tip. Any questions? Courtney?
I guess Stephanie sort of asked my question. I don't have any other questions, so.
Okay. Courtney? Amy?
No questions.
Howard?
So I'm need to keep flogging this thing, but the worst case scenario is these parking leases would not be extended, and there would be a requirement to provide a parking in this area, and therefore gobble up the community space with parking, which would be landscaped and all that, but is that the worst case scenario?
Generally, yes, and that wouldn't happen until 2028. And even if it was gobbled up, as you said, it would go away at 2035.
Because
the lease on the back parcel,
they go away.
They go away at 2035.
So 7 years of limbo.
Well, 7 years of a parking lot, so to speak.
And so you don't want to pull out the eminent domain card here, right?
Oh, we're not an eminent, we don't like doing that. But in this particular situation, we are now negotiating with the people in control of the parking spaces that would give us the ability to cover that so that the community gardens would not be impacted.
Okay. So bottom line is you feel that the parking arrangements, the expiration of the leases and so forth, then you have contingencies to provide parking that the city would require for this project. We will not leave these poor seniors having to give up their cars and walk everywhere.
Although we are in an area that is not necessarily for here, I'll answer that to the degree that we treat our seniors very well. We have shuttle buses. We set up alternatives. We love this location because we want seniors that are willing to give up their cars. We have downtown workers that give up their cars in order to live on our properties.
Okay, so I see that the project description says, under the AUD program, a maximum of 63 units per acre is allowed. What is the maximum number of cars allowed based on the acreage here?
Cars? Well, the cars are...
It says allowed, parking allowed.
He means
Units.
You mean units, right?
I'm sorry, I misread this. I thought that was spaces.
Do you know the answer?
Okay.
What density are we at?
So
I think we're at 45 units per acre.
We're at
63
45 units
you're at
per
45
acre.
units. And what is
Roughly.
your AUD parking requirement for 45?
One per
One's
unit.
per unit.
One per unit.
With no guests.
Seniors is different.
Okay. All right. That's
Oh,
my
it's half.
question.
If it's a half a, it's
half a space per
half a
unit
space per
for
unit because
senior
it's low
housing.
income senior.
And
One
again,
half space per unit.
One half.
22 and a
space.
half spaces, and you've got
17.
We got 17.
Right.
Incidentally, you know.
And we have a parking study that we've submitted to planning that'll be reviewed by the show. I mean, I think Kathleen laid it out that that is the body that's responsible for reviewing the adequacy of the parking.
Just to put your mind somewhat at rest, we have the Garden Court project that the Housing Authority operates. We have 98 units there, and there's 23 spaces. 28 spaces, okay, total for 98 units. And that functions perfectly well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask the question. Thank you. Done.
I mean, you probably know this answer off the top of your head, but this building that's going to be built right next door has this, Mirasol, thank you, has a two-story element at the front. Do you know what the height of that is? And then
The rendering, the way it's shown here,
Mm-hmm.
show what that is. is accurate insofar as we actually took their three-dimensional CAD model and kind of put it in with our model to create this rendering. So
Okay.
you get a sense of.
I'm just, and then you don't know what their third-story height is in relation to your third-story height? Offhand? Okay.
They're
They're four.
They have
There's
four.
four.
That's right, they have four.
Yeah.
That's right, it goes 2 to 4.
Yeah.
No.
What about?
You have a question?
Yeah, how that building next to it relates to. You can see over there. Yeah.
Yeah, last time we explained that we had some conversations with the architects who designed this building about reconfiguring our backyard. We took off the balconies in order to create sort of a maximum sense of privacy between the two buildings, and we relocated the units in such a way as to take advantage of the sort of open spaces here and minimize the sort of privacy impact on that project.
There were balconies on that side for initially, and then we eliminated those to minimize the conflicts.
And do you know how many units this project is?
80 or 89. I think.
89. Okay. All right, so comments from the board. Stephanie, would you like to start?
Well, this diagram helps, and I really appreciate the landscape buffer that you created and giving that further study. It's something that was sorely needed from the last submittal. And also seeing this relationship between these two buildings, I think the neighboring building did it more successfully with the innies and outies over here. I think that this is about as good as we can get as far as a landscape buffer. But I don't see any landscaping, and so it's just kind of generic, though. I don't know what any of that is. Right. But I'm comfortable with architecturally what's presented. The landscape needs to be more detailed, and I'd like to see more details with regard to the wood portions of your proposal, and the slats and that whole design and how that will be detailed, because I think that your proposal for Hurdy plank, not convinced that that is necessarily a good solution, because I think that it's a little bit cold, and maybe it could be enhanced with real wood, warm it up. Maybe it could be some of the colors that you selected could be warmed up a little bit, and the gray might be a little too cold and too dark. But those kind of enhancements I'd like to see in the future when we see this again. But I like the project, and I think that the large three-dimensional rendering from the east elevation really helps understand that study of the depths that you've presented on that side of the building.
Okay, Courtney?
I think the project looks great. I appreciate the additional landscape area at the front. I am concerned about those existing trees, and I thought there were more than 2 on your property, so I would just ask that be further identified on your subsequent submittal.
There are a couple others, and they're on the landscape plan.
Yeah, I see them here in this, well, it was up there, yeah. At the front of the property, but the parcel next door, maybe there's some trees that are actually on their property as well. But that project was designed with the intent of keeping a row of trees essentially between the parcels. So yes, so we just want to make sure that that's maintained as much as possible. If you look at the photo here, you can see the trees at the front, which I believe are what you're showing on the plan, are considerable size and scale. So we want to keep those. Otherwise, I think it looks great. No other comments?
All right. Amy?
Yeah, I think that architecture is successful. I think I like the rendering and how it conveys that front view of the building. And I also think that the landscape was successful along that front facade and how you have more of a buffer between the walkway and the building itself. And yeah, overall, I like the project, and I think it's appropriate for the area in which you're building. So.
Howard?
I agree with the comments that have been made. The only one I would add is that I think the handrails could be maybe a slightly different thing than a paneled look to look like the other paneling that's on the building. You said there was a little gap between the IFRC panels, and I would think if the railings were a little more open, that this would be a third thing or whatever. You have the stucco, you have these panels which are in line and part of a solid building. It would be nice if these were more open to make this more of a
bigger gap,
a smaller board, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's the only comment I have. Otherwise, is this project ready for PDA?
I mean, we'd like you to basically make that determination.
Yeah, that's part of what we're trying to discern today.
I'd like to see details, that's all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think...
And the kinds of details and suggestions that you make could certainly accompany the approval, design approval, so that when we do come back for an in-progress as we're doing the CDs, we will have those details and work with you on those.
This is a discussion, this is not a motion, so we could theoretically give them preliminary design approval, let them go ahead, develop their working drawings, and bring in progress and come back for final approval.
Well, we can't actually give them PDA today. We can say that it's ready.
It's ready for.
Yes, and then they'll come back after they get their modification, and then we can.
Why is that? Because
it's because they need a modification. They don't have it.
They need the staff hearing now.
So just to clarify again, so that we're all on the same page, we'll be coming back on consent for that design approval because it happens to be in the week in between your regular meeting, and that will get us what we need in order to make that application for the tax credits in the July deadline.
Right.
And in conjunction with that, you can have, if you want to make additional comments like what you have just said, for us to come back in progress and show some of the details. We're happy to do that.
Mr. Chair? I'd like to see the details, but you'll get your deadline. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Also, another comment about this criteria up here. The project compatibility analysis needs to be done today, prior to going to the show. So please include that in your comments.
Findings.
The findings, compatibility analysis, which is also on your pink sheet here. So the only comments that I have, and it sounds like the board in general is fine with the mass, bulk, and scale. You've addressed the comments from the previous time. I think there's definitely been an improvement to the design of the entrance lobby and the main taller portion of the building. Additional landscaping provided, and a lot of positive improvements. But I do think that, as I think most board members would agree, that particularly the street-facing facades, that, for example, the way the window recesses are represented in the rendering, it looks like there is a reveal there that I think would be really important to, for example, not just to have 1 inch between this surface and this surface, but 6 inches or 8 inches back. Those windows should be recessed to look like the architecture is doing something substantial. Similarly with other especially the street facing and driveway entrance facades. I could understand elsewhere if you went back to, a standard wall thickness, that would be, in my view, acceptable. But on the front facade, I think that would be really important to maintain a deeper recess to the windows and doors. So would someone like to make a motion? Howard?
We need to do the compatibility analysis first.
We do, but that would be part of the motion.
Okay, so I'll make a motion.
Great.
To continue this project indefinitely, to return to consent that it is ready for PDA, but we will allow PDA to be done on consent, okay? And that the board has reviewed the proposed project and compatibility analysis criteria have been generally met for this and as follows. Compliance with city charter municipal code. General consistency with design guidelines. The proposed development project's design complies with all city regulations and is consistent with ABR guidelines. Compatible with architectural character of city and neighborhood. The proposed the proposed design of the proposed development is compatible with the distinctive architectural character of Santa Barbara. Appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale. The size, mass, bulk, height, and scale of the proposed development is appropriate for its neighborhood. Sensitive to adjacent landmarks and historic resources. This is not applicable. Public views of ocean and mountains. The design of the proposed project responds appropriately to established private views. And appropriate amount of open space and landscaping. The design includes an appropriate amount of project open space and landscaping. I believe, and there's one last, carry forward the ABR comments to the Planning Commission. So
No, we don't
I
need to
think
read that.
that's-
We don't need
that's
that
not
part.
applicable.
No.
Yeah.
No, but please, in your motion, say continue to the show, because that's the next hearing. So
So
instead of indefinitely, be continue to the show and then to,
I'm sorry?
back to ABR.
Hearing officer.
Continue, so we are continuing this project to
The staff hearing officer. And then back to
So made.
consent.
Okay.
And then back to ABR
Now,
for consent.
is that your motion? The totality
Yes,
of your
with
motion?
the comments, also comments about recessing the windows and the vertical panels and possibly opening up the railings. And
Okay, we need
I
to
will
be
sec-
specific about those, but because it's not, as yet, it's not part of your motion. So can you articulate those?
I will try. Number one, to recess the vertical elements in the design facing the street and the main entrance facade, east facade, to recess these elements so that they look substantial, that there is depth, greater depth to the architecture. And does that say it pretty much?
I think, yeah.
And the other one is to open up the railings a bit so that they are not quite as solid as the spandrel walls between floors in these vertical elements.
Okay. We should, under discussion.
I will second that, and I would like to add under discussion that the applicant is to preserve the existing trees along the property line to the west to the extent possible, and get an arborist report to verify the findings that's possible. And that
To
can be
certify
done.
that they can
Sure.
be preserved.
Yes.
During construction, throughout construction.
Or that they're even worth preserving.
Oh, is there
They
a
may be,
question?
they may be diseased.
If they have bark beetle
Look.
or something like that.
Get an arborist report.
They look really healthy in this picture.
Well, who knows when that was taken.
The construction on the other property. So, I don't know.
Okay. So we have a motion and a seconder. Any other comments under discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Was that? Is this an
I don't
extra
know.
one? Well, whatever. She needs one.
I'll give. Yeah, you can take one.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
These are yours. So you want to keep that one, or
Oh, you want the color one? Yeah.
really?
These came in during the meeting. These two emails.
They're new?
For the next project.
They're in addition to the
Okay. Oh, wow.
But these are all yours.
Oh, sorry.
25 minutes. 20, half an hour.
Okay,
Half an
going
hour.
on
In a half an hour.
to item 7,
Came in during the meeting.
1818 Castillo Street. The third concept review, and action may be taken.
Yeah.
This was last reviewed 2 weeks ago on May 11th. It's a proposal to demolish an existing single-family home and construct a project of 7 units. With 7 covered parking spaces.
All right, so
visual.
Yes, your name for the record?
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Deddy Pikert, RRM Design Group.
Lisa Plowman, RRM Design Group.
Yeah, right.
I guess Randy Douglas, owner.
Okay.
All right, so I think everybody knows this is an AUD project. We're not asking for any modifications. We are proposing the 7 units. At the last meeting, you asked us to make some minor adjustments in the site plan, which we've done. And additionally, you wanted us to present you with some exhibits of the neighborhood showing existing buildings and 3-story buildings that are 2 and 3-story buildings in the surrounding neighborhood. And I'll have some exhibits to show you. So, you want to?
I mean, we can just show them exactly what we did.
Yeah.
In order to provide some additional landscaping at the front, we narrowed this separation here. It was 11.2, and now it's 9 feet. And so we got about 2 feet of additional. Yeah, we got 2 feet of additional landscaping at the front of the site by narrowing this space between the buildings here. And then
you also moved everything back 2 feet.
Yeah,
we
Or
this
the front-
portion.
the front portion.
This portion.
And narrow that
Yeah,
gap.
yeah. And then we expanded these planter areas, I think consistent with some of the comments from ABR, trying to get a little bit more landscaping up at the front here. And then we did provide the elevation showing the proposed project within context of the existing buildings on either side of it. And then, Did you probably want to just walk them through the graphics here?
Got a package here. And a package over here. And so this drawings. So, first of all, this is an oblique aerial that kind of shows the block that we're on and the surrounding blocks that you asked us to study and kind of catalog what kind of buildings exist. And here you can actually see when you look at this oblique view that within the block there are quite a number of 2-story buildings, and there's actually one that's a 3-story building in the block, and then there's some 3-story around. So that's just kind of helpful, so you can actually.
Story on our block, please.
Yeah.
No, please don't yell out.
Okay.
There'll be a chance for public comment.
I can't hear, and he's making comments, and I didn't know if he pointed.
You're welcome to come around and stand behind us, and you can. And anyone from the public that's here is welcome to come and.
Thank
you. Yep.
We also have hearing aid help too.
Yeah, I'll speak a little louder as well. So this is an aerial view of the same area, and it shows that all these buildings that are outlined in yellow, those are 2-story buildings, and then the buildings that are shown in red are three-story buildings, and there is actually one small element of three-story within the block, and then there are a number of three-story buildings around the block. And we took some photographs so that you could kind of see where those are and what they look like, and they're numbered on the site plan. So, for example, this is number 1, and that shows that three-story element of this, two-story condominium there. Number 2 is a three-story building with a soft story for parking. And then number 3 is a small three-story building over here. Number 4 is this Victorian, 3 stories. And then number 5 is actually a 2-story building. So where is that? That's this one here, and you can just we just showed that because it goes back, and it's very similar in certain ways to the project that we're proposing here. And then number 6 is another little 3-story building. So it's not unusual for there to be 3 stories in the neighborhood. And again, the property is zoned for multiple family dwellings. There are some single family dwellings immediately adjacent to our site here, but any one of those could be redeveloped in the future, and that's really the intent of the zoning, is to allow for the development of multifamily projects. Finally, you asked us to show you an elevation of the frontage along the street, Castillo, with the 2 houses on either side. But again, either one of those houses could at some point in the future be developed in a similar manner, similar sized lots, et cetera. And I think, as a just concluding comment, I think this is it's a good project. I think we've done a lot to minimize the impact of any 3-story elements. They're really kind of located more in the center of the site, well back from the street frontage, and then nestled into the roof area, so that you can take a look at the rendering on the cover. That I think it's a nicely designed project that really fits into the overall character of the neighborhood, and certainly is consistent with the multifamily development that has gone in within that block and all around the block there. And I think, in fact, as a new project of high-quality design, it's going to enhance the values in the neighborhood. I think it'll be a real asset. I don't know if anything else to add, Lisa? So today we're looking for design approval. I know that we've read some letters that indicate that Mr. Barnwell intends to appeal this to the City Council, which is fine. So we understand that that's possibly the next step for this project. But we'll hope that they'll reconsider in light of the fact of what we've shown today with these exhibits and the quality of the design of the project.
Okay. We have...
Can I just interrupt, Mr. Chair? I'm sorry. Did you say, Deddy, that you had an exhibit that showed your project in relationship to the adjacent buildings?
I just showed that.
Just elevation, street elevation.
Did I miss that?
There it is.
Oh.
Sorry. I did show that. It's just hand-drawn, but... I mean, those are 2 single-family houses. They're, the minority in the block, I would say. But they would be right adjacent there.
Okay. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. So we'll open up public comment. And first speaker slip I have is Richard Handler. Can we?
Sit right
thanks.
here.
And just to remind the speakers from the public that we are an aesthetic board, and so we're looking at mass bulk and scale, architectural character, and neighborhood compatibility in terms of the mass bulk and scale.
That shows an overlay. I generally don't need one, but this is fine. Is this on? Good.
And just one other reminder, so give each speaker 2 minutes.
Perfect. My neighbor took that and showed how the project looks compared to the other houses right next door. Some of my comments were, why can't the front unit face the street and have a front porch like the rest of us? That isn't, there's nothing about that in this project. Last week or 2 weeks ago, it was raised to take the garage doors off, make them carports. The architect said the laundry area was in the garage. If we shrink the full first floor bath to a half bath and put a stackable washer and dryer, then laundry is safe and you can take the garage doors off, which would guarantee 7 parking spots and not overflow storage. I thought under the statute they have to have public bike racks not hidden in the garages. And again, unless I misheard, the bike racks were in the garage. Also, by shrinking the first floor baths, you could make a more inviting entranceway for each of the units. So that's everything.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Kathleen Hoffman.
Good evening. So since the last meeting, I did a lot of research on the AUD project because I'm just really concerned about the size and the scale of this building. I live in at 1815 Bath, which was Exhibit 1, which was called out as a 3-story unit. It is not 3 stories. The parking lot actually goes down, and so from the street level, all the units look to be a 2-story unit. I mean, to be 2-story level, because we do have quite a big slope on our driveway. So I would not call that a 3-story unit. We are 7 units, and they're all 1-bedroom condominiums. So it's exactly the same size lot, and the back of our lot butts up to the back of this new proposal. So I'm very concerned about what the turnaround is in the parking space for this new proposal. I know last time we talked about the idea that people would pull directly into their parking lots or into their garages and then pull back out again. But we have a lot of people that pull into our driveway thinking that it's going to go somewhere and then have to turn around and pull back out. So I'm concerned about that, how people are going to turn around in that driveway. I'm concerned about where the garbage pickup is and if the garbage trucks are going to have to drive all the way down to the end of the driveway. My unit's actually at the very end of our. I'm at the very middle of the block. So if garbage trucks are pulling into that unit to pick up garbage, I'm highly impacted by noise. And so I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about landscaping at the very back. I'm concerned about the height of the building and the blockage of the southwest sun exposure to our units back there. And I'm really concerned just by the fact that these apartments seem to be built as roommate situations rather than as single-family homes for rentals, since they're 3 bedrooms with 3 bathrooms. And that it's just, we're going from a 2-bedroom house to 19 bedrooms. It's just this, huge increase in density and noise and population. And I understand that what the AUD is trying to accomplish by getting more people to live downtown, and the idea that they will be living downtown so they won't need cars. I'm just really concerned what it's going to do to our neighborhood.
Okay. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Stephen Harper.
Thank you. So I guess, and I might be a bit of a broken record on some of this, but to start, I'm still a little bit upset that I never received any notification of this project, and I live right across the street, so I feel that, I'm entitled to have an opinion on something that's going to impact our neighborhood this substantially. And frankly, I think it's a little shady that something that's proposed of this magnitude, that releases weren't sent out to the neighboring houses, and I know a few other people who didn't receive them. That said, I did receive a notice from one of my neighbors letting me know that the second review hearing was going to be going on a couple of weeks ago. I came to that, and I guess I wasn't at the first review, so I couldn't confirm this, but it sounded like, I think as you stated, there were some elevations asked for that would show how this related to the neighboring houses. And I don't know that, we've still seen that. We have an overview of, a bird's eye. We have a reference point that doesn't relate to the neighboring houses. And then we do have this one, black and white that looks like they kind of just barely drew in the third story. So I guess that was kind of the point of what Richard had brought up, with relation to the scope and scale. This is another one of these little mock-ups, but this shows the house across the street. That is a two-story house, but it also shows, essentially what this project would look like on top of that two-story house, and it's literally double the height. Not to mention how far it goes back. If you look at overviews of this neighborhood, we have plenty of two-story apartment complexes and houses. They fit in just fine. This doesn't fit in at all. It's not 2 stories. It doesn't have nearly enough parking, which is something that I know there's been some debate as to whether or not this board can address that. But, I did some research into the actual population density of downtown Santa Barbara, and on average, there are 1.6 people for every bedroom in downtown Santa Barbara. So when you're comparing that to this neighborhood, we're talking about at least 20 more cars on a street that only, if everybody parks really considerately, can host 26 cars. I counted them. The idea of even 5 or 6 more cars on this block is really devastating. I already park at least a block away from my house 3 times a week. So I just ask that, as the people who live in this community, we don't have any say in whether or not parking is going to be a factor. But, the ABR, I think, can, and I think that you have before. So it's just something that I'd ask you to consider in asking them, that maybe they should be able to take some responsibility in trying to contain some of the parking elements for this design. I don't think it's a lot to ask for them to trade out the garages for carports. That would help. That's just, I guess, sorry. That's all really all I have to say.
Okay. Thanks very much for your comments. Pamela Lasker.
Hello. Thank you for letting us come back one more time. I've been at all the reviews for this project. I live 2 doors down. I'm just going to cut to the chase. My feeling is that 3 stories in this neighborhood is too high. It's too dense. There's too many bedrooms. There's too many units. And I actually brought photos of the streetscape because I figured Mr. Piker didn't seem to really want to bring that for you. So I thought you'd like to see what the actual street looks like. So this is the project house. It goes on the other side of that. This is also the project house. And then this is the house that's next to that on that side. And then I brought a copy of the 2-story condo project. This is the one that backs up, as you can see at the back of this picture. Yeah, it's 2 stories. They graded the lot at least 3 to 4 feet. So this is how a 2-story unit compares to the neighborhood. And if you put this next to the project house and add 1 more story on top of it, you can see what kind of height we're talking about. We're talking about a huge project that is sticking up in the middle of this neighborhood. The 3-story projects he's been showing you, one is an apartment building that is down the street and the parking is underground. The other one is a small segment of the building is 3 stories, and it's in the middle of the block in Pedregosa, I think 1 bedroom that he managed to get by. But the feeling, it's just too big. I'm not opposed to a project going here. I think a 2-bedroom, 2-story project, even with 7 units, as long as there were 2 bedrooms and parking on site to accommodate. It just seems ridiculous that this AUD ordinance has thrown out all the common sense. that the ABR, the Planning Commission, all these other things, I went through the condo project, and they took these things into consideration. They took parking, they took landscaping, they took height, they took number of bedrooms and impact on the neighborhood, and it seems like it's been thrown out the window trying to find more rental units, and I understand, but it's going to impact our neighborhood with the people who live there now. These gentlemen are not going to live in our neighborhood. We are, because we're not going anywhere. So I really ask that you do not let it go through with 3 stories. You know, it needs to get mitigated, and he's just keeps bringing the same project back, I think, with the feeling that you'll get tired of looking at it and send it forward. So I ask that you don't. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
You want more pictures? I have more.
That's okay. I think we got it covered. One more speaker, Frederick Lang.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
Hi. Well, I kind of enjoyed the architect's comment about the effect of market appeal on the property. I'm a 30 years experience as a real estate broker and a real estate appraiser. And my whole take on this thing is from the point of view of market appeal. I looked at this. I went up and down the street this evening and just to see what was there. I mean, we've got, not counting the subject property, we've got 12 properties on the street, 8 of which are single-family cottages, and 3 of them are 2 to 4 unit buildings, 1 of which I own, and there's 1 5-unit building, and the 5-unit building is all small units. The 2 to 4s are 2-story buildings, and what my experience as a property owner is that what you'll see in density for tenant density is typically 1.5 to 2 people per bedroom. And that's because I'm one of the biggest offenders when it comes to parking on that block, because all of my units have got at least that density.
Thank you for admitting that.
You know, I am. Because, I mean, I've got 5 uncovered parking spaces on my lot, and my tenants contribute 9 cars. So what I did is I went up and down the street and knocked on everybody's door, and I asked them, I said, how many off-street parking spaces do you have, and how many cars do you have? And I also counted up the parking spaces on the street. There are 30 parking spaces on the street, and there are 30 off-street parking spaces. And of the total cars people admitted to having were 54 cars. So we currently have a situation where we've got 6 open spaces, potentially open spaces on the street, based on what's available. Now, if you're going to throw, 18 to 19 bedrooms on there, you're looking at a potential at the rate of 1.5 to 2 people per bedroom, and all of my people have cars. So you're looking at 27 to 36 potential cars and 7 parking spaces. And if that's going to have a huge impact. I mean, from my point of view, it's going to have an impact on my ability to rent my property, because people are going to have to, park, 2 and 3 blocks away, or I'm going to have to find a way to squeeze more cars onto my lot, which I don't know how physical can do that. But I think, the issue. I mean, the other issue is, of course, the bulk of this thing. I mean, it's way bigger than anything else in the neighborhood. And I think that's going to have an impact on the little cottages around them, because who wants to live next to this apartment building that's just towering over your little home? Okay.
Thanks for your comments. We also have a couple of emails that were just handed to us right before the project opened for the meeting today. One of them is concerned about the scale, saying that the project would be too massive, would block out the sun from surrounding houses, as well as devastate the views from every house in the neighborhood. And the other email comment was regarding parking also. This project is meeting the AUD requirement of 1 parking space per unit, and that was distribution of parking to living units was debated and reviewed through a number of charrettes and public meetings over a number of years. How many years did that go on? A couple, at least 2. And was arrived at and approved for this neighborhood as being appropriate for projects of this type. And And in some cases, we have seen AUD projects where there was literally no two-story elements in the nearest block and surrounding neighborhood, and where the proposal was 3 stories. And in some cases, we approved those projects because it's a big change to the zoning for those areas. And sometimes the first building of this type to go up will be out of scale with the neighborhood. And that's just a fact. One building has to be the first building, and then others will follow. But anyway, those are just some general comments for the public about this. And I understand your concerns, and I appreciate you showing up and making your comments. I'm not trying to invalidate any of the concerns you have or say that you're wrong. I'm just giving you trying to give some further background on it. So we have questions, time for questions from the board. Howard.
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions.
Courtney.
I don't have any questions, but if I could, I'd like to read some excerpts from this AUD incentive memo that we received from the city.
Great.
So I'm going to read some excerpts from a memo that our board received from the city regarding the AUD program, just for the benefit of everyone involved, including the board. So the AUD program is an incentive program, and it's intended to promote needed residential development within the city. The approach taken to develop this program involved policy trade-offs that make AUD projects potentially more controversial. One such trade-off is parking. The AUD program allows for a minimum of 1 parking space per residential unit. This reduction in parking is intended to encourage affordability and help decrease building mass. As the AUD program is implemented, a certain degree of change in development patterns is expected, particularly in neighborhoods which allow higher densities. An AUD project is not exempt from the compatibility criteria which this board is required to analyze. However, the configuration and location of the parking and whether it contributes to an effective design is within our purview. There is a balance between advancing the objectives of the AUD program and approving an appropriately designed project. In other words, there may be instances where a project meets the AUD development standards but is lacking in certain design elements such as landscaping, open space, etc. It also notes that we need to consider the zoning of the neighborhood. In this project's case, we're in the R4 zone, which is zoned for hotel, motel, multiple residential. This zone also permits a building height of 3 stories not to exceed 45 feet. In closing, a reasonable balance must be considered when reviewing these projects. There are a lot of things to review and consider here, so I just wanted to give you guys that additional info.
I'll just make one brief comment. Last time I mentioned to board members that the parking wasn't within our purview, and what I meant by that was that it's not within our purview to require them to provide more spaces. That violates the AUD ordinance. What's mentioned here is configuration and location. Yes, that's very much because it has to do with architectural design and massing, and circulation and so on. So that, but to require them to provide more spaces would not be appropriate for this board. So anyway, yes. Questions?
Can we make a comment?
Well, we're not into comments yet, but we're into questions. But if you don't have a question, then you can make a comment.
Okay, good. Yeah, I made the same comment last time. And I know that parking numbers aren't in our purview, and I said this at the last board meeting, that the configuration is under our purview, and we've reviewed a lot of these projects where the parking was in a garage formation and not in individual self-contained garages. And we've seen it many times where those garages, we all know, are going to get enclosed and never see the light of day. And I said it last time we saw this project, and I'll say it again, that the garage doors are not an appropriate solution for this project. I think that the project is well designed as far as the architecture looks nice. I could even accept the third story as it's designed because it's nestles in deep into the site or away from the street for the most part before it goes up to 3 stories. But it seems very much lacking in open space and landscaping, which I said at the last meeting. And if that means it's 1 unit too many on this property, then so be it. But I suggested ganging these together. Several of the board members like the separation and that relief in between the building. In between the buildings, both of those arguments have merit, but it leads me to believe that there's lack of open space on this property. And I've said what I said about the parking configuration, that I don't think it's going to work, and I don't think it's appropriate for this AED program or this AED project.
Okay. Courtney.
I appreciate the applicants. Did you add the porch at the front, or was that already there?
We've always had that. The porch.
Okay, so I missed that on the last review.
Little stoop coming up to the.
Yeah, I think the street friendliness of that is somewhat lost because of the aspect, and in the rendering it's shaded, so it's difficult to see what's really going on there. I don't have an issue with the massing. I think it's appropriate, and I believe I said that at the last meeting. I do think there's some merit in the conversation around removing the doors on the garages. I live in a similar neighborhood that's very impacted, and parking is a huge issue, but we deal with it. Our neighbor has a freestanding garage that gets used for storage, so I do see that being an issue, and not just on that one particular garage, but I've seen it elsewhere too. So I think generally the board's looking for something here, and that might be it. I think the open space is appropriate for this type of project, and I think that's it. Okay. I would also add that, I mean, we're really dealing with a mass versus parking issue here, as the applicant knows, but for the benefit of the public, it's difficult to weigh those two things because they're both, if we add parking, we increase the mass, and if we remove parking, then we have a bigger issue. So.
Okay, Amy.
I like the project overall. I think based on the zoning for where this project is, it's appropriate. And I like the design, the character, the architecture, and the way they've treated the street facade with the 2 stories and the increasing landscape even from the last meeting. I'm okay with the garage doors as proposed, and I think at this point it's ready for design approval.
Okay, thanks. Howard.
How wide, what's the clear width of your garage now?
11 feet.
11. So I do feel that, first of all, the project is well designed, and I have no issue with that. I do think it is, however, too big for the neighborhood, too big for the site. And I think that the development, the project, pays a price to give each parking garage 11 feet, when if they were to gang up the parking, they would require 9 feet each. So there would be 7 times 2 feet for each car gained by ganging the parking, which is 14 feet. Furthermore, the project is 5 3-bedroom units and 2 2-bedroom units. I think that brings it to 19. Is that what it is? Yeah. And I think that that the spirit of the alternative unit density ordinance is to provide housing more affordably. And I think that 3-bedroom units, 3 and 2 units with this mix is not an affordable project. This is actually for pretty affluent people. And I think that a mix that would be more appropriate for affordability, also for parking and for neighborhood issues, traffic issues, a mix of maybe 3 bedrooms in the back where the massing of the block is higher buildings are concentrated in the back of the property, in the middle of the block, and the lower units could be very easily placed near the street at the front of the property. To me, that is the way this project should be designed. But I cannot support the project as a uniformly slab of a building for the entire length of the property with no breaks, no turns, and no separations. I think that the parking is an issue. The garages, not just the doors, but the size of the parking garage.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just one quick comment in response that may help as we go along. I mean, I think removing the garage doors is a possibility, and that might be up to Randy to think about, but I really think it would detract from the design of the project. But one solution that might help a little bit is, we put windows into the garage, a bank of windows.
One thing to add too is that the city planning staff can condition the project and will condition the project that space has to be used for parking and not for storage. And that way, if it ends up that people are using it for storage, it's a zoning violation. It's a violation of the permit. And so that can be, a complaint can be filed with the city, and the city can come out and review it to see if it's a problem.
And also, if you think about it, if there's only one parking space available for a unit, why would they give up that space and have to search around the neighborhood for a place to park their car when they can park it right there? But, so we're open to suggestions on those garage doors, but I think hopefully making it a little more transparent for one thing, and then just the fact that it is conditioned would help, so that you don't end up with this, open garage with all kinds of stuff kind of on the sides, et cetera.
And I think the door actually makes it a little bit more compatible with the feeling of a single-family neighborhood rather than a carport.
And I will say one other thing that, with respect to affordability, these are really modestly sized units. They're sized exactly in accordance with the AUD, and there is a need for three-bedroom units. There are a lot of folks, when you think about a city in which the median home price is over $1 million, that there are a lot of folks who just will never be able to afford that, but they might be able to afford to rent a 3-bedroom home for their family, et cetera, close to the downtown. So there's a need for it, I believe, and it is going to be a whole lot more affordable than the alternative of trying to buy either a condo or a single-family house.
I'll just make a little comment tagging on to that. Given the concern of the neighbors about the size, mass, bulk, and scale, and there was a comment made last time about reducing the overhang at the street or at the driveway. I was just noticing that. I was thinking, what kind of family would be renting units like this, and be a couple of kids, maybe 4 kids, 2 to 4 kids. But it looks like that each bedroom is designed more like a master bedroom. It's got a king size bed and so on. And I'm just wondering if there might be some reduction in scale, especially at the 3rd floor, if the bedroom was made a bit smaller. I notice there's two closets also at the third floor. Yeah, there's a hallway closet and then another small storage closet, linen. Yeah. So I'd just throw that out, that it looks like there may be ways to pull the mass in just a little bit more. The rest of the design is very compact, I have to say that. It's not like there's anything luxurious about it. But it looks like there might be a little bit of pulling back at the third floor that would be possible. And the other thing I was wondering about was on the street-facing facade,